Good evening, this is Poland Daily News and I'm Aleksander Wierzejski. More facts have come to light about Paweł Rubcow, the Russian GRU agent who returned to Russia in an exchange of spies. Rubcow's Polish partner, Magdalena H., who was previously thought to be an innocent victim, also had links to the GRU, as investigative journalist Piotr Nisztor of Telewizja Republika reported. The case was taken up by Michał Solarz.
According to investigative journalist Piotr Nisztor, the fact that charges were brought by the public prosecutor's office indicates that Magdalena C.'s role was not limited to that of a naive victim of a Russian agent. A charge under Article 130 of the Criminal Code concerning espionage can be brought against a person aware of this activity. From all the information we now have, it appears that the journalist, a correspondent for a number of foreign media, was alleged to have assisted a Russian GRU officer in carrying out espionage activities. The accumulated evidence at the investigator's disposal was the basis for the prosecution's case that could prove the journalist's role in the espionage affair. According to information that Piotr Nisztor obtained from the prosecution, she was supposed to begin her activities in the middle of 2019, shortly before the elections won for the second time by the United Right government and Putin's subsequent aggression against Ukraine. In the end, this entire narrative against the United Right government, which strengthened Polish security through the Pegasus system, as well as Polish borders, were actions that were criticized by Magdalena C. Her criticism coincides with the actions carried out by the opposition to the United Right. Magdalena C. has been a very active critic of Mateusz Morawiecki's government. In international forums and in foreign media, the journalist criticized the actions of the Polish state on the border with Belarus. She worried about migrants. She reported for foreign media, installing the narrative that the hybrid war being waged on the border is merely a political invention of the right-wing government. And this hybrid war, as the Polish government calls it, is not really going to end soon. We don't really see the end and the light in this tunnel. The woman was involved in presenting a report prepared by the foundation Ocalenie, which included catchy phrases for those indoctrinated by the leftist narrative. Officially recognized deaths of migrants are documented by Polish activist individuals and publicized by the media, so comprehensive information about many of the dead is available in the public domain. These actions were intended to discredit the image of the right-wing government in the eyes of the public and were a copy of Rubcow's own publication. Poland is playing bad cop by not letting in refugees, using disproportionate force. In other EU countries, like Germany, this would be unacceptable. The woman was also involved at the time of the illegal takeover of TVP by the December 13th coalition. The very fact that the partner of a GRU agent was active during the violent takeover of public television is also another example of how deeply Polish institutions linked to the current authorities, are infiltrated by Russia. We are calling for this to be clarified. The fact of the matter is that this spy was an exchange without any benefit to our country. The negotiations for the release of Andrzej Poczobut took place during the government of the United Right. The December 13th coalition did not gain anything from the free release of Rubcov, in addition to the knowledge of the files Rubcov had access to just before his fall into Putin's arms. According to the politicians of the United Right, the December 13th coalition is trying to sweep the compromise under the carpet. Investigative journalist Piotr Nisztor, however, claims that Rubcov's contacts with Magdalena C. are only the tip of the iceberg. According to unofficial information, we will soon learn more names of people with whom Rubcow's Russian agent was in contact. Michał Solarz, Republika.
Apparently, the scandalous case of the handling of the release of the Russian spy, including granting him access to the secret files just days before his return to Russia, has caused a split within the ruling coalition. One of its senior members, Grzegorz Schetyna, who has been sidelined by Donald Tusk's cliques, is demanding a white book explaining all the details of the case.
Grzegorz Schetyna was the leader of the Civic Platform at a time when Donald Tusk was sleeping through the salons of Brussels. After it emerged that just before GRU Colonel Paweł Rubcow was extradited to Russia, the Bodnar prosecutor's office handed him a complete file from the investigation into his espionage case. Schetyna commented, "There is a need for a white paper on this case. Rubcow's activities over the years, when he was functioning as a Russian intelligence agent, his contacts with journalists, with politicians, with state institutions, but also how he was able to reach these prosecution files at the end. For, as Rzeczpospolita reported in the first 2 weeks of July, Rubtsov was able to familiarize himself with the files from the investigation into his case, the open part in the prosecutor's office and the secret part in the secret chancellery of the Internal Security Agency. Schetyna's party colleagues are reluctant to comment on the case. Rubtsov could see the secret files in the secret chancellery of the Internal Security Agency and the open ones in the prosecutor's office. What do you think about this?
Zgadzam się z panem prokuratorem, bo
I agree with the prosecutor because I have no reason not to believe him that there was no information that would endanger state security. And the white paper proposed by Grzegorz Schetyna in the Rubtsov case? Excuse me, this is a question for my club colleague, thank you. Because, after the scandalous facts about the disclosure of the secret files to the Russian spy, Dariusz Korneluk, claiming to be the national prosecutor, bent over backwards to downplay the case and convince everyone that there was nothing important in the secret files that Rubtsov had spent a fortnight reading. There are no operational techniques, methods used. From this material, the accused found out what the Polish services know, just how he passed information to the Russian Federation. That's all there is to it. So he found out what he was doing to the detriment of both Ukraine and Poland. Korneluk's evasive strategy seems to be repeated today by members of the Tusk coalition. If these files did not threaten state security, why were they in the secret chancellery? The national prosecutor said it was for formal reasons. And what do you think about this idea of Grzegorz Schetyna for a white paper of this Rubtsov case? Rubtsov's contacts with politicians, journalists? I am not familiar with the idea, so it is difficult for me to comment on it. It is hard to believe that the materials collected in the secret office of the Internal Security Agency from the investigation against the Russian agent are meaningless documents. Undoubtedly, these are very sensitive materials due to the nature of Polish and any counterintelligence. It is obvious that these materials, which Rubtsov learned about, are knowledge which will be of great interest to the Russian special services. First of all, to the GRU, which can learn about the methods of the Internal Security Agency. The prosecution explains that it did not know that Rubtsov was to be named and that he would be sent to Russia. To put him in the Internal Security Agency for 2 weeks and show him classified files. Spies have great memories. I can't imagine there could have truly been nothing in such classified files that could threaten state security. There are more questions than answers regarding the release of all files to him. It was known that he was going to participate in the exchange, which is organized by the US services. Therefore, I am afraid that the gentlemen from the Internal Security Agency were aware that they were showing these files not to anyone else, but to a functionary or agent of the Russian secret services. Everything is reminiscent of what happened during the first Tusk government, when the so-called reset of relations with Putin's Russia was implemented. Since 2008, there has been cooperation between the Military Counterintelligence Service and the Federal Security Service of Russia. Donald Tusk agreed to this. Could it be that this cooperation between the Russian services and the services of Poland under Mr. Donald Tusk are still continuing? Because that is what it looks like. The president's words have caused holy indignation in the ranks of the Tusk coalition. A recall, in 2013, with Donald Tusk's approval, the Military Counterintelligence Service signed an agreement created in Moscow with the military counterintelligence of Russia's Federal Security Service. Under this agreement, Poland was to, among other things, alert the Russian service to the activities of third countries. Radosław Jankiewicz, Republika.
The priest Michał Olszewski was arrested on Good Thursday, 28th March this year. Today we saw him for the first time after 163 days. He was suffering from poor prison conditions, his skin was pale, and he had lost a lot of weight. Father Olszewski was arrested in order to prove the criminal behavior of the members of the previous government. So far, the prosecutor's attempts have been in vain.
Everyone in the auditorium was shocked. Father Michał Olszewski gave a detailed testimony. For an hour, he told the Warsaw-Mokotów District Court how he was treated by the services, including the Internal Security Agency, after his arrest and in the so-called police hole. The court is asking for evidence in the form of recordings, for example, from the detention room. These have still not been provided by the services. The court has not yet received this evidence. It knows from whom to request it. It has not yet received it, and that is the reason for the adjournment. Until October 18th. Another matter is also outrageous. On August 28th, the regional court in Warsaw extended the provisional detention of Pastor Michał Olszewski and 2 officials of the Ministry of Justice for another 3 months. No reasons have yet been given for this decision. It is already the 9th day that we are waiting for the justification from the court. Why is it important? It is because only from this day can we file an appeal, for which we have 7 days. If we are even 1 day late, this appeal will fall and our client will lose the right to defend himself. On the 31st of July, the Court of Appeal shortened the remand until the 31st of August. Suddenly, in mid-August, while the priest and the officials were still in custody, the prosecution brought a new charge: participation in an organized criminal group. They claim that there are new circumstances, and the prosecution has now discovered, after the Court of Appeal decision, that there is a criminal group. This is a fairy tale. Magdalena Wójcik, the judge who decided to extend the pre-trial detention of priest Michał Olszewski for another 3 months, has been promoted. She has been appointed head of the criminal division of the Warsaw District Court. There are serious doubts as to whether this case is being conducted in the correct way. Father Michał Olszewski, leaving the court in handcuffs, blessed the assembled crowd, who threw flowers in his direction. Let's juxtapose this picture with the Russian GRU colonel Paweł Rubtsov, who was recently released from prison. On one side, a Russian spy, in good shape, no sign of imprisonment. On the other, an emaciated priest, who is said to have lost up to 15 kilograms in pre-trial detention. Łukasz Żmuda, Republika.
Manufacturers are fleeing Poland and Europe. In the last few days alone, a white goods manufacturer has announced the withdrawal and redundancy of almost 2,000 people. The list is long, and every day more factories and more future unemployed are added. Why is this happening? Edyta Hołdyńska investigates.
A wave of layoffs and closures is sweeping across Poland. Companies are choosing to operate abroad. Why is this happening? And will there be a government response to this economic crisis? When suddenly a family member, a husband or wife, loses his or her job, it really becomes a problem these days, when everything becomes more expensive, when electricity and gas become more expensive, when fuel costs more than 5.19 zloty per liter. This is a protest of railway workers, whose fate is shared by other laid-off workers in Poland. This time, nearly 1,800 workers of the Beko company in Łódź and Wrocław joined this map of layoffs. What is going on? For 2 decades, we were a European assembly plant, doing relatively simple jobs for the industries of other economies. The government should have some kind of strategy for economic development, because if these simple jobs keep disappearing, then you need to think of how to develop economically and create more of those better jobs. According to Beko's announcement, Polish manufacturing plants, specifically those in Łódź and Wrocław, have been struggling financially for several years. Nearly 1,800 people are expected to lose their jobs by the end of April, and German companies are benefiting. At a PKP cargo site, a Deutsche Bahn employee asked if he could take pictures. A man wearing a vest with the Deutsche Bahn logo and a German accent showed up at the Lublin section hall and asked if he could take pictures of the repair hall and locomotives. I prohibited him from taking pictures and ordered him to leave the premises immediately. Now that Polish railway workers are protesting, it seems that Deutsche Bahn Cargo Poland is actively recruiting new employees in Poland. Good morning. I'd like to know if your company is currently recruiting for the position of machinist. Please wait a moment. In order to contact you, should I send you my resume by email? Yes, exactly. Maybe it's not that the situation is bad. It's just a matter of restricting PKP cargo, of dismantling it, in order to open the possibility for a German carrier to enter the Polish market. We know that for years, German railways have wanted to enter the Polish market. It is an extremely lucrative opportunity for German companies. The authorities blame the previous government for the current situation in the state-owned company. And, unfortunately, there still doesn't seem to be any sort of strategy for economic development. Edyta Hołdyńska, Republika.
Poland's opposition fears defense spending cuts. The government denies this, but leaked documents suggest otherwise.
A strong Polish army is a guarantee of our security. Unfortunately, Donald Tusk's government is cutting spending on army modernization. In the draft budget approved by the December 13th coalition's government, next year's spending on central material plans is lower than originally announced. But in general, the Ministry of Defense's budget for the next year is a budget that limits the ministry's capabilities. This is because development spending will depend on the goodwill of the finance minister and the president of the National Holding Bank. TV Republika's reports from July are thus confirmed when our journalist, Piotr Nisztor, revealed an excerpt from a letter from the Chief of the General Staff to the Ministry of Defense. This leaked document was a wake-up call for the General Staff of the Polish Army, led by General Kukuła, a wake-up call that the expenditures outlined in the multi-year plans prepared to ensure the development of the armed forces were simply going to be cut. At issue is spending under the so-called central material plans, i.e., money for the modernization of the military. Instead of 54 billion zlotys for 2025, only 45.8 billion zlotys, or almost 8 billion less, was written off, as we were the first to report. I would like to once again congratulate TV Republika for showing the dangers of reducing funding for the development of the Polish military. Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, then Minister of National Defense, wrote of alleged lies. According to our plans, defense spending will increase by at least 10% compared to this year's budget. Please do not repeat lies, and do not rely on unclear sources. But no new purchases will be made. For example, there will be no South Korean K2 tanks for the time being. The contract for the delivery of 180 new machines was supposed to be signed in September, but it still hasn't happened. According to the plans, assumptions of the ministry, from the Armed Forces Support Fund, 60 billion zloty were supposed to go for purchases, but unfortunately, no funds have made it. Around zero for purchases, for investments. The same round zero is found for purchases and investments of the Armed Forces Support Fund in 2025. Investment in modernization of the armed forces is a priority. We all see what is happening on the other side of Poland's eastern border. This paints a picture of such complete irresponsibility, a complete disregard for what can really happen. If, in such a situation, those in power are thinking of cutting spending, it is a direct proof that they are not in control of the state's budgetary security. And national security is not something the Polish government should compromise on. Marcin Szewczak, Republika.
That's the news, but stay with us for the weather forecast.